it's important that we understand how Azure implements security across virtual networks. By default, a machine that is on one virtual network cannot communicate with a machine or a database on any other virtual network. Now, obviously, if we're dealing with storage accounts or Azure SQL database that don't exist on virtual networks, then that doesn't apply because those are public services that require a key to access. But if you've associated your storage account to a private endpoint on a virtual network, then you will find that a virtual machine on another network cannot communicate with it. But that doesn't stop the communication. We can actually set up what is called a peering relationship between the two. So if we go into one of the virtual networks and we go into peering, then we'll be able to add the connection between those two networks. So I'm going to say add. We do have to give the name of the peering connection from the one network to the other, and then we're going to also name it from the other back. So let's call this new test 1 to 2. Now we're using the resource manager model, of course. If we wanted to connect two networks that were across subscriptions, then we could use the resource ID model, and this will allow us to connect with a virtual network that we don't have access to or a subscription. We're going to connect this name here using our subscription. We're going to connect to new test 2. So we are working on new test 1 and we want to connect to new test 2. Now we do also have to create a name for the reverse connection. So this is called new test 2 to 1. Now this is where we get to configure whether we allow traffic in both directions or we only want the traffic in one direction. So allow virtual network access from 1 to 2 enabled, allow virtual network access from 2 to 1 also enabled. If I was to disable this, then all the devices on 1 can connect to devices on 2, but 2 would not be able to route traffic to 1. Now there's also the concept of forwarded traffic. Now forwarded traffic is basically traffic that comes from another source that it wants to get to new test 1. So let's say there's another peering relationship between new test 2 and new test 3, but traffic from 3 can get to 1, and then of course the other way around as well. Do we want peer traffic that comes from other networks to get to 2? We also have this concept of a gateway transit. So if we want to set up a network gateway, then this will allow us to go across the VPN if we want to connect into the corporate network or express route. So that's it. We've set up a two-way communication between new test 1 and new test 2. We've enabled it in both directions, and right now we're not allowing traffic from other locations, and so I can say OK. And so now it's doing a dual deployment here. It's deploying the peering relationship on the one side and also the peering relationship on the other. So that's it. It basically set this up. We can see that the peerings now exist. If we were to go over to the new test 2 network, into peerings, we can see that that deployment succeeded as well. Now, setting up this peering is not the only determinant of whether these two networks can communicate. We're also going to be dealing with things like network security groups, which block traffic, certain types of traffic from traveling over the network, and also firewalls and other settings that are basically going to shape traffic or user-defined routes and other things. So just simply setting up these two networks allows them to understand the IP address range of the other network actually exists and how to get traffic there, but you still have security settings that could get in the way of stopping traffic from traveling or at least determining what kind of traffic can go over that network.